Good evening, all, and welcome to the June edition of the Emily Dickinson Phosphorescence Contemporary Poetry Series in 2025. Now in its 5th year, the series brings you some of the most exciting contemporary poets we know who have caught the spark of Emily Dickinson's own phosphorescent light. My name is Anna Plummer, and I am program coordinator at the Emily Dickinson Museum. And before I introduce tonight's poets, I have just a few words of Zoom housekeeping for you. So we encourage you to use the chat feature in Zoom to share affirmations and words of encouragement for our poets here tonight. They won't see your comments until after the program, but we will be sure to share this record of our time here together today. So feel free to start now by telling us where you are tuning in from this evening. And tonight's reading will be followed by a Q&A, and I'll be looking for your questions in the typed Q&A feature so that I can pose them to tonight's poets. And you can find this in your Zoom toolbar, and you may place questions there at any time throughout the program as you think of them. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's poets. Bridget Lowe is an American poet. In an early interview, Lowe expressed her interest and commitment to figures who are rejected by the same social groups for which they are expected to perform. The Poetry Foundation elaborates, her poetry is accordingly concerned with those who feel they are both looked at and invisible, who are exploited yet remain deeply unknown. Bridget Lowe was born in Kansas City, Missouri. She is the author of 2 collections of poetry with Carnegie Mellon University Press, At the Autopsy of Václav Nijinsky in 2013, followed by My Second Work in 2020. And her work has appeared in numerous publications, including multiple times in the New Yorker, Poetry, the New Republic, Parnassus, and the American Poetry Review. Her work also appeared in the New American Poetry Anthology. Her honors include the Emily Dickinson Award from the Poetry Society of America, the Discovery 92 New York Poetry Award, a fellowship to the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and the Rona Jaffe Foundation Fellowship to McDowell for an extended residency. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So I'll go ahead and introduce Rachelle and Barbara, and then we'll get started with the readings. Rachelle Toarmino is a poet from Niagara Falls, New York, and she is the author of the poetry collections Hell Yeah and That X, as well as several chapbooks, most recently My Science, 6 Finch books in 2025. So is that coming up?
It just came out.
Just came out. So go get it. Winner of the 2024 6 Finch chapbook contest. And her work has appeared in Poets.org, Literary Hub, Electric Literature, American Poetry Review, Bennington Review, Southeast Review, The Slowdown, and Omnidon, which awarded her its 2024 Single Poem Broadside Prize. She earned her MFA in poetry at UMass Amherst, right here, where she received an Academy of American Poets Prize. She is also the founding editor-in-chief of the literary publishing project Peach Mag, and the creator and lead instructor of Beauty School, an independent poetry school, and she lives in Buffalo. And last but not least, Barbara Mossberg is a wordsy and passionate person who will think your story is just what our world needs. Author of just released Clown Cantos, Everything is Alive in Its Own Way Singing, and the recent Here for the Present, A Grammar of Happiness in the Present Imperfect, Live from the Poet's Perch, and Sometimes the Woman in the Mirror is Not You, and other hopeful news postings. Professor Mossberg's distinguished career of 5 decades as a prize-winning poet, author, teacher, and honored educational leader is dedicated to a widely out-of-the-world optimism and brave faith. President Emerita at Goddard College, founding dean at California State University, Monterey Bay, professor of practice at Clark Honors College, University of Oregon, former National Council of Research on Women Senior Fellow, and American Council on Education Senior Fellow, Mossberg uses her public platform to promote the power of words in each of our lives and human fates. She has been recognized by the National Endowment for the Humanities, American Council of Learned Societies, Mellon Foundation, Aspen Institute, and others, and was twice named the Senior Fulbright Distinguished Lecturer and is a current Fulbright specialist. We're so glad to have you all here.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So Bridget,
Okay.
feel free to start us off.
All right.
Okay, so as the first reader this evening, I want to thank Anna Plummer and all at the Emily Dickinson Museum. What you do is invaluable, important, inspirational. I'm really honored to be part of it, honored to be here. And thank you to Barbara and Rachelle for sharing this experience with me. There's just too much to say about that or to quantify or qualify. So I am going to start with some poems. These are new poems, and I thought a long time about how to sort of correspond with Dickinson's work through this reading, but I think that would be too long and too complicated, and so I'm just going to read new work and just a little bit of older work, and hope that some of those connections come through, and then maybe in the Q&A we will find out more. But I did want to open the reading with just a brief lines from Dickinson's I Know That He Exists. I know that he exists somewhere in silence. He has hid his rare life from our gross eyes. Ars Poetica. But I knew the end, had already been there, touched its elongated snout, the awful hairs, watched it pushing its pie-tin around the backyard, its tiny crossed eyes so close to the ground. Wondered at the plan as I was sent back, my shoe filled with blood, my path so queer. At school, I walked a thin perimeter of chalk. Impermanent, I begged the above for his sweet mother love. The pelican that bent its neck to open the fount of pure blood from its very own breast. But he sent to me this to figure instead. And there I began my lifelong work. Rook-de-goo, said a couple of dirty pigeons in a hazel tree. A vacation. Sorry. Gotta stand right there. Okay, a vacation. We went to the sea once, and he lay down in the sand and didn't move for a whole day. Sometimes all they want is to hear you talk, and sometimes they will punch you in the mouth. Several times, until your eyes get that look, until your eyes won't look up anymore. Sometimes it happens to kids, and they never look up again. No one could ever comfort you, my mother said. When the dog died and I opened my arms, you just walked the other way. But that's not true. I had my tricks that no one knew. The tree I used to sing beneath. The things for which there was no song. The boy that could not, would not, grow into a happy man. This will be, and the soul will survive it, the tree would sing to me. This poem is called Waiting, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about it. It is a poem about a mother and the child waiting, but I just wanted to say in this poem, the mother is also waiting. And there's a Blind Lemon Jefferson song I love called Black Snake Moan, and it opens with, oh, this long kind of moan. I ain't got no mama now. And I think about that sort of separation from the mother as this core wound that we all have that mimics also the separation we have from God. And so there's these layers of longing that are happening. Waiting. My first great love was a drunk, her long dark hair falling over my face. But even that is made up. My mother wore her hair short. She used to cut it herself, a shaggy bob that did not flatter. The truth is, my first great love grew up beside me like a wild sister, prone to putting her head down on the kitchen table in the middle of dinner, saying she wanted her own room, that she was going to run away. I was the one whose job it was to beg her to stay. I'd sit at the edge of her bed and touch the hem of her bathrobe with my small hand. At night, I looked for the big hand, reaching down to me. I waited for a little rope ladder to fall through a cloud. Why is this my life, she'd cry. But it wasn't a question, and I wasn't an answer. One of the things I love about Dickinson is how she relates to nature and the natural world and its hyperbolic proportions. It's sort of this ecstatic, intense experience. And this is called Girl Meditation. Shit-faced on summer, letting the sun bang me over and over. Good old Misty, all the times she was tied up to receive the stud, lifting her jaw upward with strain, showing her big brown teeth to the sky. My body a weird dumb animal I keep. My body a weird dumb animal I keep having to feed. A big numb something I took in, shot with arrows, poked with sticks. Marcus Aurelius, think of meat in a bag, rotting. Focus on it if you can. I already thought of that. I see it and never don't see it. My face, meat. God, meat. My heart, this world. And now I enter the white hot center of my pain. I enter the beginning to try to change the end. Oh, and yeah, I'm afraid to own a body. I am afraid to own a soul. Also, for that poem, one of my other all-time favorite Emily Dickinson poems. And this is Undelivered Lecture on Wonder. And there's an epigraph for this, which is something that a poet did say to me after, I don't know, I think my second book, but I had had my second child at the same time. And he came up to me and said, "So what are you doing now, writing mom poems?" And so I wrote this poem, Undelivered Lecture on Wonder. Wonder is not knowledge. Wonder is anti-knowledge. If wonder is anti-knowledge and anti-knowledge is motherhood, then wonder is motherhood. 5 lectures I never delivered on wonder because I am a mother. Mm-hmm. Wonder is not a miracle, but it has some of the same substance. All I want is for something to happen to the poem that is beyond my ability to understand. Unproductive, I hit my poem with a stick. It hides even deeper inside of itself. At times I've been highly productive yet still suffered terribly. Image of something breaking off the main body, in terms of machinery in airplane off the runway. That exact point on Daphne's body that is no longer all girl and not yet all tree. the point at which one thing becomes two, then two becomes three. I have 2 children, which makes me 3-personed. They left their DNA in me. The dancer's foot leaving the stage. My son is trying to jump. It is a developmental milestone to be able to lift 2 feet off the ground at the same time. My son thinks he is jumping, but really he is just lifting his arms into the air and then nodding his head hard as if landing. When I write a poem, I think I am jumping, but really I am just lifting my arms high into the air and then nodding my head hard as if landing. My son climbs the back steps over and over. It is his life's work. My son is more animal than not animal. He scales his high chair like a tree and swings his legs over and into place, ready. Feed me. He clings to the front of my shirt when I carry him around the house. I pick crust from his ears, eyes, scalp. He kisses me by grabbing me by the hair and pulling my face toward his. Only 18 moons since he's been out. He runs to me across every room. The last picture taken of my son inside the womb shows his face pressed flat inside me, the large black pools for eyes, and the crushed, blurred lips. He is very big, they said, as if I did something right. Every day and night, hoisting the milk-huge font of my breast up to his tiny, toothless mouth. Productivity is the enemy of wonder. Wonder is the enemy of capitalism. Childbirth is the enemy of capitalism, though it keeps finding its way in, the way a screwworm enters the brain of a cow. The imagination is the true womb. 39 weeks, they told me. Now we can go in and get the baby out. No, I said, don't take him out. I am in love with imagining him. Poems that finish off the page in a moment of convergence. He broke my waters, and I stood in the kitchen having that happen, trying to narrate it to myself. Babies finish off the page, meaning they were never yours to begin with. These days, I am keeping all of my ideas inside my womb. I regretfully admit that I have failed to produce new work during this period. When my son jumps successfully, both feet off the ground at the same time, he is briefly untethered from this earth. I submitted myself to childbirth. I am a mother lost in wonder, and in this way, I shove my small cog in the wheel. Where does a poem resist its own form, break out of its body? There was a moment when his head was out, but his body was in. I didn't know what we were then. And then the last poem I'm going to read is Wretches. And this is the poem that the Dana Levin selected for the Poetry Society of America's Emily Dickinson Prize, and it was a highlight of my life to have that happen. And I wanted to read, again, one of my favorites from I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, the end of that poem when she says, "And then I could not see to see." Wretches. In the lamp, my work colleague was baptizing their child, and that's what inspired this. Wretches. In the lamplight afforded us by a generous donor who wished to remain anonymous, we sat in the front row, eager to see the hand come down and hover over the infant flesh, squeeze the doughy knees. Please, we asked, press the palm lightly against the forehead, in a promise that all the future wounds will have some modicum of purpose. Just ask, they said, and it will be. The soul is a gob in your chest. Be brave and touch it. Oh, oh, what mess. What thick discharge from the eyes. I once was blind, and then I got blinder, and then I could see. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. Wow. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to Bridget and Barbara for being part of this with me. And thank you to Anna and the museum staff. This is such a special place, and it's surreal to read my own poems in it. And I don't know, thank you for this experience. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I'm going to skip around in time a little bit with the poems that I am going to read. I'm going to start with my newest poem. It is for the poet Alice Notley, but it is also for others that I lost this spring, so this is for all of them. It's called Wednesday. I have my so-called whole life in the morning. Wednesday, the cat's at it again, and the sound wanting me awake is hungry. It's a personal day. Anything can happen. I can indefinitely, so I oversleep for years. It takes forever. I have my whole life played by the ear. Little difference it makes. Little good, I've decided it's done. I can more or less take it when the line breaks, don't know what I'm missing. When the language lumps oddly in the throat and I let it. What sense particular, when dreaming I discover you are timeless, perfect, discursive, and indefinitely so won't skim from the words. But that's not what it's like. What it's like isn't like anything. Mostly it's morning, Wednesday, and my loneliness older. The elegy, oh, going, read it and weep. Who are you to me? All this, nothing. We are neighbors. I'm going to read from a chapbook that just came out called My Science for folks at home. It is a serial poem that has 10 parts to it, and each part has 3 parts to it. It's a very deliberate order and arrangement, so it feels strange to read excerpts from it, but I am hoping it works. And I'll leave off before we get to the end, so if you want to know how it ends, Sixth Bench has copies. I'm going to start from the beginning and then jump to the end. 1. Common senses. Active dying is trending. The order of operations. Hunger is the first to go. Listening the last. 3 days later for the final cells, but we round down, following the heart's lead. I'll let you go, and I won't keep you. 2 ways the father hangs up the phone. Nothing but power lines above open fields of scrap metal and smoke. Copper belongs to beauty, the way it sets an international standard to which all other conductors are compared. Not nothing. Beauty belongs, making us in common. Or if we use the telephone, life on either side, as good as any poem, long as the static, classic night. Three. Center of attention. Nothing turns me on like a lover, shouting my name in bed, to be onomatopoeically fuckable and multiplied by 1, that I mean and therefore become the average of all data, instant of very thing I am. The animation turns the system into a spectacular disco. Milky light bursting in and out of the blue. Then again, fasting forward makes any center of gravity look like a target. I miss you is so accurate, the way I shoot out all my feeling toward a mark I can't make. You know how it goes, to cross your arms into a premature conclusion. Six, freak accident. I luck into my material like a room where people hide, waiting to shout, surprise. Today's signs, please come in, I'm open. In case of crisis, shatter. I have my doubts finally. Not to tell a strange world, flashlight under the chin, but to react right-sized and given something to do. Since I smell smoke, I buy flowers. Since we're pointing fingers, it took an emergency for doors to open out from the inside. Invent your life-giving vest with your breath. Push. 8. I have my limits. If creating a constraint is not unlike inventing problems, and I like to know my way around, then the limit toward which all my desires reach is pleasure of impact. To feel the fact of my own voice back itself against a wall, matter made by feeling, around in the dark. The mother gives the child a box of crayons, meaning to keep her busy. She lines each along the perimeter of the room, making a threshold of color. You want proof people love you, he says, telling me my problem. To go out on that kind of limb, index finger, holding blinds back. Love gets me out of the house. Love always gets me out of the house. I am that woman, mouth open, ended, breath away. 9. Lyric lesson. I could handle the bonds between feeling and hearing, but now it's the bicentennial of feeling like and wanting to. Touching is antique by comparison. Many examples list music, though that's its second nature. Listen. Our appetites growl mouthward, addressing each other in subjunctive. All night, crickets sound the way glitter looks. Like catching so rightly, we forget it's physical. All this to reach you. All this to say what eats me. And then there's one more, but you have to get the chapbook if you want to know how it ends. Anyway. Jumping forward a little bit in time, this is a more recent poem. It is in 13 parts. And what I want you to know about it before I go in is it was written in response to a series of paintings called Love Canal by the visual artist Dana Marie Terrell, who shares a hometown with me in Niagara Falls. Love Canal is a neighborhood where his family once lived. And for those of you who don't know, in addition to being a neighborhood, it was originally imagined at the end of the 19th century by a man named William Lowe, who's either a con man or a utopian or a capitalist, depending on who you ask and how you look at it, maybe all of the above. And then in the mid to late 20th century, it became the site of a horrific health and environmental crisis, and it's the first Superfund site in the United States. It's part of a new project on my hometown. So this poem is called Model Citizen. And I want to read it because Emily was with me as I finished it, and I'll explain why. I wanted out, but all wanted me to come to the window. I owned up to it, the window, fell for the king-sized outside. I mistook lung for lunge, felt a proceeding. What use is country? I don't know what one's for. And I do feel right at home daring to bite the hand. Dirt under the nail. It's a formality, a sentimental grammar, common ground and pomp at the opening, when I am long for no place, and from it a ringing. Headlines of blue on blue. I was open to blueprints, but wanted country. Open, my meaning, and you to meet me in it. My country is wind-locked, land-filled, lovely, like nothing. Love has nothing on me. Until outlasting nothing, a drum rises in the field where it means not beat but room, only barely. Like this, it unsettles the score. It is no sign of life, but life, how it goes, begins with a bang. And isn't it just like a sound to rise and want out? There's something measurable in the air, this chemical feeling. Home and its personal problem. And a sugarlessness gets in through the vent. And a shape of life, but no life comes out. There, the back, the houses hold on me. The pool lifts, homesick. Falls, a lap. Slag in the garden, foil in the garden. Image of the garden pours, concrete. Caulked surface of seasonable junk. This everlasting gist. One way or another, mind. Here I have more to do with science than science. Brief overexposures, with bait on all sides. A description speaks out, its mouth full and rudely. This grand untitling of what won't round down to unusually high incidence, unusually high frequency. Once I was a tourist all over looking for a useful description. Then I was a diva, making associations of my own. I would not give in to awe in its asymmetries, could not get rid of air, its dub, effects. It was good to be home. I knew little of it. No place there, no other place there, not even the blue, wet, ringing feeling left on either side. It was a failure of frame, the fence, an expectation for life, what could not be wrung from it. It tested our limit, enjammed a little world. Once I held out for another window. Now I see through it. I was in awe of awe, having seen it for what it was, seeing it for all there was. What there was, I realize it is an expected turn, measured, the ends, when they meet after all. This is my life. I will die in it. I could not fall from it, be only of it. I was neither the snake nor the sound out charming it. I would not buy that partially, recreationally, subsequently, shortly, commonly, officially, formerly, temporarily, thermally, approximately, chemically, previously, currently, properly, continually, only, how this could happen. I know this age is golden and chemical. In fact, it's doing wonders. I believe in forgetting its weather, in solar rinsing sugar into pointillist bangs of light. Another wind, a second nature, plaques and mist and gloss. Best we can do. This is it. Now the evergreen sequence stands for itself. I whiten the dimensions of conditional, as belonging as it gets, as paradise were a bell, a kinging in the ear. What follows will be simple, a rack. I didn't know. I'm gonna end with an Emily cover, sort of, I know, doing it backwards. It's supposed to open with them, but I wanted to invite her in last and sit with that. So this is the poem that I kept hearing when I finished this poem, and it's poem 340. I felt a funeral in my brain, and mourners to and fro. Kept treading till it seemed that sense was breaking through. And when they were all seated, a service like a drum, kept beating till I thought my mind was going numb. And then I heard them lift a box and creak across my soul. With those same boots of lead again, then space began to toll. As all the heavens were a bell, and being but an ear. And I, in silence, some strange race, wrecked, solitary, here. And then a plank in reason broke, and I dropped down, and hit a world at every plunge, and finished knowing then. Thank you.
Bridget and Rachelle, I heard the Emily Dickinson in you, and you put me in a spell. I'm dazzled and enthralled. Great pleasure and honor. And the Emily Dickinson Museum, I'm here, ground zero. Pinch me. I've been working on Emily Dickinson for over 50 years as a scholar and as a teacher and as a poet. And she has, this little nobody has changed my life. And when I was working on my first book on Emily Dickinson, I was at the Houghton Library at Harvard in Box 8. And I was looking at the materials and I said to Krister, I've got to go to Amherst. I have to go to the house. And I came here to this house, to this museum, and up the stairs I saw a dress on a stick. And then I flew home and I thought about this. So it was written in 1973. Emily Jumbo, flying with Emily Dickinson incognito, cognoscento. Emily, you're headless like any goddess, torso classic on a stick. You're static in your white dress on a stand where you spent your cloistered nights and days. You're not going anywhere, hung and grounded. A stone says your bones are in the ground. A display case shows a letter you wrote. You said you never left your father's ground for any house or town, a life so conscripted and conscribed. Everyone agrees you never left your room again in your white dress. Scholars said had a 35-inch waist after you were gone. Where's the body? Where's the life? If we look for you, you are everywhere, elsewhere. People in Thailand and Morocco already know you before I arrive, drinking green tea with mint. They quote you and then get back on their motorcycles and camels, motorcycles and elephants. You are at home in their land. They quote you in Finland, where moose step delicately on ice, and there is a certain slant of light on winter afternoons. And in Budapest, eating duck and getting drunk, and cherry soup and Venice splashed in the November rain, and Vesuvius against the blue sky, your geographical gestures in your poems from a widely lived life, a worldly life. You were there, And how did you get there? When I think of your poems, I don't see how you could have written them staying home. How never having flown, how much you flew. How never having known, how much you knew. But of course you knew. Of course you flew. You are the witch. You said it yourself so many times, but people thought it was a figure of speech. You left the dress as your address, as your cover. Scarecrow, your straight man. You flew the coop. Of course you flew. Pilot home. Bless you. So I was talking about another dress. This is called Ode to My BCBG Holy Inappropriate Dress. First the strophic dress, turn, then the antistrophic, counter-turn, then you tell me. It was on sale, shopping with my teenage daughter. Mom! It's 2 layers, almost see-through. Beneath is flesh-colored gauze sewn into bodice and then flows free from the neck and arm seams. That's it. That's what's going on with this dress. Flow. The top is bright, soft red with white flowers. It is so transparent, so skimpy, so flimsy, like a cloud manifests, weightless. The dress flutters when I turn as if there is a breeze. It has its own weather system, eddies of wind, current, squalls as I move or even breathe. Even the sleeves, little flaps bunched at the shoulder, then draping down, fluted, the whole thing loose, wavy, rippling, the V-neck gathered, edged with ripples. Ladies, you know, help me out here. Then the empire waist, ruffles all along my bodice and a ribbon sloping down into a bow. Material so light, so translucent, so fluttery, it rides my curves, and the dress descends loosely to a 10-inch ruffle bordered by more ruffles. So you've got the dress, and now you're thinking of me. What, am I 4 or 9 or Audrey Hepburn at 16 or Maria from Sound of Music? I'm dating myself here. I've turned 60, so they say. My arms, you know, orangutans, the scope and heft, the feathered arms, enormous, hang prodigiously. Now think of flesh, soft, white, floppy, arms so heavy with soft flesh they dangle. When I walk, my breasts are hanging too, nicely filling a 34G, and they sway. You've seen me and dismissed me as a comic turn in 1,000 films, the stout, giggling ant in the background, shaking to the music. My belly sags and sways, my jowls, you see gravity at work, erosion, fault lines, exposed, aging's geology. So now, you have me turning, counter-turning, now the uphold. Why? Why do I wear this dress? Well, isn't it obvious? I wore it in Rome, and the children rolled their eyes at one another and gave advice on how to wear the bow. My husband shook his head without shaking it. I peed in the plaza. They fled. Okay, it happens. And the stains came out nicely. And I wear it today with pearls to visit my mother in her outpost in the assisted living place, where we have hired 24/7 care since her 2 falls and perhaps 1 stroke 3 weeks ago. She has not spoken since. Last night, I lay my hand on her trembling hand together like that. They look so similar, hers a little more wrinkly, a little more brown spots, red from Coumadin bruising. My own hand in 28 years. 28 years, which once seemed enormous. My mother of such size and heft, to me now a flutter in time, a ruffle, ripples on the surface, like stone dropped in pond, her ripples becoming my wrinkles as pond absorbs energy. 88 does not seem so far, and 28 years a heartbeat this morning at her bed with the rails we installed last week, so she doesn't fall out and hit her head. Hospice, which she does not know about, or she does, and none of us knows either how something like this is read. Is it clear to you? This is my perkiest dress. So light it flutters when I walk. You would swear I was in the Carpinteria afternoon breeze. If it had any more ruffles, I would fly. I am a flag of some weightless nation, like a cloud manifests. My arms are bare. I flutter and flap and sag. It is so light. It billows and sways and caresses each curve. I have plans for tonight, freedom and hope and time to finesse. I kiss her goodbye. She speaks. You look pretty. That's why I wear this dress to face to face, heaviness, all gravity's laws, weighted with sorrow and loss and fear and hospice. I bear it, I wear it, this buoyant excess, this innocence, good style, good class. Tell me, it's an inappropriate dress. This book is Clown Cantos from Emily Dickinson. A little madness in the spring is wholesome even for the king. But God be with the clown who ponders this tremendous scene, this whole experiment of green, as if it were his own. And it's not fashionable or serious or respectable to be the clown and to think that everything is tremendous and to be so enthusiastic. But she says, God be with the clown. And this book is organized around that. So every chapter has that for a line. And this one is dedicated to our son who died at the beginning of COVID. It's called Frolic King Among the Nebulae, and he was a great friend of the Emily Dickinson International Society and of my life as an Emily Dickinson scholar. And he wrote this email before his death. It is hard to fathom and seems almost wrong to even try to wrap your head around this kind of beauty. And he was looking at the Webb telescope that NASA had released of the nebulae. The scale of this beauty, these structures dwarf our whole galaxy. The eclipse of our sun by our moon is a good indicator of the scale for perspective, meaning the size of us, our eyeball relative to the Earth, relative to the moon, relative to our star, relative to our galaxy. Our eyeballs just don't seem to be designed for experiencing galactic beauty. Our bodies in general are not good for frolicking in the ether, but our consciousness is perfect for that. And therefore, I hope one day to frolic about all the nebulas. Love you, Nicomas. A NASA education website. A star's life is a constant struggle against the force of gravity. It's not possible to know if you can actually frolic without gravity, is it? When you imagine frolicking, don't you see leaping about, defiance against gravity's laws? So you need to be earthbound, imprisoned, to break free here and there, now and then. You need props for unlawful behavior, ribbons and baskets and hats and striped shoes and music, a flute and fiddle. Meanwhile, you tell me it's all energy, a vibrational universe. So I don't know what being in the nebulae is like, this place of starbirth, or what happens to gravity when sound is light. Gravity is needed for stars to become, and there has to be enough to warrant serious frolicking. We say in sad times the situation is grave. What is going to spring matter? It has to be grave enough. It has to have gravitas. Frolicking only makes sense in this case after a death, when it is understood that it is called for to kick up one's heels and swirl and whirl into so much shining dust, to spin and spin, becoming a star as you are, as you knew you would. And the subtitle of this book is Everything is Alive in Its Own Way Singing. And Nicolino told me that if he died, he said, I will still be alive, just differently. He's taught me a lot. My last poem is Bones and Flesh. So you can see there's a lot of brutality going on here. When I was working on my book at Dickinson, I went to the Peabody Museum of Natural History, which is nearby. I don't know what I expected in this Museum of Natural History, which turns out to be death. Pterodactyl bound in concrete, a city blocks beam booms, shutter wings, inside the walls, all soiled, whence it flew, now grounded with memento, stuffed buffalo, antique animals, mangy remnants of the ice age from continent to continent. In canoes, on sailboats, and rafts, we trudge through our history, 500 years in a room, and we ascend the stairs, winding and winding, room after room. Dooms always to meet the same eyes of the hunter, skins of the hunted, remains. Clutter brings me down. Baskets, thousands of years of them, brown triangles, some poor lady's time. Oh, her time, in stifling caves, on the cliffs, on the ice, confining plains, fringed leather, dead rabbits. There are artifacts, but these are not facts. No, no, none of this is real. I deny a history of skeletons. I don't have bones, no spine, no relic to say, if you live, you die. Natural history does not include my plans to fly. I own a private evolution. This is my time now, my baskets, my mysterious flesh.
Oh, damn, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's all I have time for. Yes.
Sure, you can come join us.
Okay. Very
That's
good.
stunning.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's so special to get to be here with you, and I just love the way you mark the time and you notice your lives in such beautiful ways and make so much of your days in the world, and I'm inspired already. So I will have my computer up here because I'm looking out for some questions from our audience, so you all can feel free to put your questions in here that I will be happy to share. I'll just check that right now and make sure there's not anything I should start with. But I have a few questions of my own too. You each have such unapologetically unique voices as poets, distinct from one another and just distinct all on their own. And yeah, I'm sure they're very carefully crafted, but they also come across as undressed and very authentic. And I definitely offer that as a compliment and as something that's very Emily Dickinson of you. But I just sort of wonder, what is your journey regarding a specific writing voice? Is it something you are aware of? Is it something that you've tried to expand or to train back?
That is the question.
Softball.
Yeah. I love that question. I think of understanding early as a shy child that I could garner an outsized impact through art or poetry, but really understanding that my voice, I think of Emily with like the size of a gnat kind of thing. Having voice felt like the most intoxicating form of power. As a child, I think that felt, as many children do, a distinct lack of power in the world or agency. It was like, being like drunk as a child or whatever on this, I can do something with this, I can get attention this way, and was also very, very shy, so it was a funny combination. Kick us off with, is that kind of what you're talking about? Yeah. And then I just wanted to keep doing that and keep having a voice in that way.
That's a great answer. I don't really think I know how to answer that question. I think it is a conscious decision to speak, obviously, but it is like it varies poem her poem, and there's something very magical that happens when you consciously change the way you speak, and that therefore changes the way you understand the world. And I see like voice as like almost like the camera lens for the poet in that way. Yeah, thank you. Again, like great first question. I'm stumped by it.
That wonder and
You answered it
bewilderment.
in a poem.
Yeah, you did.
The voices, the camera lens.
You made a poem.
Yeah, the camera lens.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think that I have felt that when there's a kind of a problem, some situation, I think that sends me into this state of writing the poem as a kind of a journey, because in the process of writing it, the solution or a different way of thinking will emerge. And so the aesthetics become a source of joy, that a metaphor will come to you and a way to express it and to get in touch with something that you thought. And by the end, there's this adrenal, intellectual, emotional rush that that on this journey that the poem has given you. You're somewhere else now in your life because you wrote it.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think interesting to hear you talk about your voice also as like the tool for understanding what you're writing about. And I feel like that's something I was thinking about a little bit during your poetry, Rachelle, is your very sort of scientific approach in many of those poems, or like you're going into a list of different word possibilities. And there's clearly a lot of discovery in that process of that writing too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that observation. And I think that is something that I certainly borrow from Emily in a lot of ways. The sort of objective to take a line of speech and interrogate it, and almost like a thesis statement, try to unpack it, and even if the final movement of her poems is sometimes to shrug and say, "Thank God I don't know," but in the trying to work through something scientifically, it is something that I find a kinship with her, even if science doesn't end up being part of it.
Cool. Looks like we do have some questions. Hello, and thank you to the poets. I'm curious how each of you first discovered Emily Dickinson and what you connect with most about her work, her life, or who she was as a person.
Can I start?
Sure.
Okay. I first connected with Emily Dickinson in a way that made me not only hate her, but hate school and my English teacher and schools in general, and poetry. We were given a poem by Emily Dickinson to talk about, and it was The Hummingbird. And so the teacher said, "Okay, what is this poem about?" I answered, raised my hand, "Yes, Miss Clark," the good student. And I said, "Well, it's about a postman who's delivering the mail," and I described it. And she went around and said, "What did you think it was? What did you think it was?" And everybody interpreted it. And she goes, "Wrong, wrong, wrong, wrong." And she goes, "It's about a hummingbird." It was sort of like, gotcha. And what I then found Emily Dickinson again in graduate school, writing these poems that were scientific and bewildering and full of wonder. And she said, "Amputate my bosom, make me bearded like a man." And she's talking about, "I am afraid to own a body and a soul." And I thought, what is going on here with this poet? And I just became enamored with wanting to know her story. I have never been so struck by the seriousness and the intensity of somebody articulating what it means to be alive. And I've tried as a teacher to not make Dickinson difficult. I think she's the most difficult poet in the English language. But to have students feel optimistic and generative through engaging with her.
Thank you for that question, whoever asked it. The first time I encountered her work was in her envelope poems. And at the time, that helped me think about a project that I was working on, in which I was embroidering poems into these needlepoint hoops. And so I was thinking a lot about economy of words, constraint as like physical space. But now, apart from the sort of thought experiment of her poems, which I already touched on a bit, the sort of equal parts awe and analysis of her work, I just find her voice so loving. It almost drives me crazy when people call her cold and like overly analytical, because I find her curiosity for the world such a powerful love. And there's a real intimacy in that as her reader, which I think I try to enact in my own poems, certainly, but it makes me think of her practice of letter writing as well. And the poet Jack Spicer recommended reading her poems alongside her letters. And I tried to do that during my graduate school experience. I would wake up every morning and read her poems chronologically, and then I would read the corresponding letters of that year. And it was such a great experience because, you know, her poems were gifts for other people often, even when there wasn't a you or thou in her poems. She intended for them to be read in that kind of private, personal way, one-on-one. And I would like, aspirationally, for my poems to feel the same for a reader. Like I'm speaking, whispering in their ear, maybe. That kind of experience.
I can't recall when I first encountered Dickinson in the way that I experience her and love her now. It's like that was this long-term growth experience between the two of us but like as a writer, I don't know if there's anyone who's done more of just sort of like a public disservice in terms of how wrong the popular culture, there's a lot more attention paid to it in the last even 5 years, but growing up it was flowers, you know, hope is the thing with feathers, which was like, even those poems are complicated, but they were always excerpted for like greeting cards, or, you know, they were very truncated and you didn't get into the complicated part. And so, I mean, one could easily not understand what was waiting for them. That was my experience. And then to really start to fall in love with her work coincided for me more with just falling in love with her sort of obsessions and preoccupations of subject matter. For me, that's the core kind of her deep grief that is throughout all of her work, her deep yearning, her deep sense of aloneness, and the way she takes the, you know, if you say a word like depression, like that's an incredibly flat term. It really doesn't tell you anything. And it's not something I think would even do her a service to say something like that. But if you take the poems and you see how deeply she's engaging with feelings that, you know, come along with depression, like that really show the complicated weirdness of our feelings, like, and things that don't have corresponding names. The way that she tries to articulate a depth of like pain and suffering about being alive in the world, and constantly not quite satisfying herself in that way, and then doing another piece that's trying again, and then taking another piece and trying again, and that endless grief of yearning for that, whatever that is. I relate to that so deeply. And that's where I feel like very close to her. Yeah, like she's whispering in my ear in that sense. So I came to her very late, though, I do feel. And that's kind of also been such a joy to be the age I am now and in the middle of a new love affair with a writer that's going to be a gift for the rest of my earthly days.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, true pleasure, and blows me away. Yeah.
Such a body of work. You can keep on digging into it.
Yeah.
When we were meeting before, you were talking about Dickinson's kind of power of transforming lives, or watch it maybe being a measuring stick for you to watch yourself transform as you read her work.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Same poems feel completely different in different year.
Yes.
Sorry, Barbara. Go ahead.
No, that was the same thing that, I don't know, I probably read them 1,000 times, I don't know, for 50 years. And I read them, and I swear to you, I never read that poem before. It's completely new to me. And there are poems that, as I age and experience, she's been there, and they greet me, they meet me. So as you said, she's a constant companion for all of our changes in our life.
Also, just her use of language. There's something, it's just magical. There's nothing like, and it gives me a visceral, like physical sensation when I read her work it's insane. I don't know how, none of us know how she did that.
There's always something more that you didn't see. So much is going on. They're like, it's like nuclear fusion, you know? It's this little thing, and it's got all this power. It just radiates, and it's immortal.
I wonder if that's something you think about as you write your own poetry. And I think this next question kind of, maybe we can connect with this. Casey asks, specifically about Barbara, but I think this applies to you all, as I love how performative your poems are. And do you find yourself writing with performance in mind, or does the performance come after? So are you thinking about that performance? Are you thinking about readership over time? Or we can divide up the questions, maybe
Well,
that's better.
It's hard to say. When I'm writing it, I think I'm hearing it. And so that I feel it's very much spoken. But I love doing all the word stuff. I love when words rhyme and how they connect, and how you're connecting meaning so improbably because of the rhyme and that kind of joy. And when I'm reading it out loud, I find such great pleasure then in the sound of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I write it as performance, but I hear it.
Thank you.
That makes it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't think of performance, which may be evident from how I read my poems. I don't know. But I'm so much more interested in how they visually look on the page, and obviously I'm also hearing them, but it's more about that relationship to the page, and then I feel a sense of like when it's finished and it's set like a composition of any kind. There's music, there's the visual component. There's like, but Barbara's an incredible performer. So yeah, I think just read them out loud. I'm much more of a I think about it more as a book object.
Yeah, I think my relationship to reading has changed so much over the years. When
Yeah.
I was younger,
That's true.
and reading more at open mics and things like that, and you would know, like, your friends would be in the audience. I think my poems were, like, funnier, you know, because I was imagining my friends as the audience.
Yeah.
But now I have a much different process and very obsessively read my poems out loud as I write them, as I revise them, to the point where I have every poem I have written memorized. just that obsessively until it gets just how I want
I
it.
love
And I think in terms of performance, it has become a bit more private in that way. Like, I'm no longer like looking up to see if my friends are laughing, but I'm also writing differently now. Writing poems that aren't as funny, maybe, but yeah, projects have changed over time.
That's a good point. Something that can, the audience format.
I have found that it feels very brave to read many of my new poems out loud and to share them in that way. And there's something so healing somehow about it, and communing about it. And so I have found that as something that's been coming in my last 5 and 10 years, that I'm daring more. And Dickinson, after great pain, firmer feeling comes in, to speak of pain. And when I wrote that poem about my mother, I hadn't dared to even write those things, and to take the pain and the unknowing and the fear and the dread, just being so scared of what was happening to her, but to put it into words, to make it aesthetic and rhyme and shape and known in that way. Very healing, I think.
Yeah, it's such a release to finally get to read something out loud that you worked on so privately. Like my first era of being a poet and having that very public kind of weekly experience of writing and then reading the thing that was 5 days old. That changed when I did my MFA during the first year was 2020, so no one was doing anything in public then, and the experience of of reading and sharing what you were writing had to wait in a way that I wasn't used to, and the poems changed. And there was something that finally, when you do get to share what you work on in that kind of privacy, as I think of Dickinson, the release is so different, and I don't know, it's really transportative. Yeah.
Well, it's known that Dickinson had the freedom to write because of the individuals that the family hired to do housework. And scholarship has shown that in the years between the periods of hire of 2 different Irish immigrant women who were maids at the Dickinson household, Margaret Marr and Margaret O'Brien, Dickinson wrote significantly fewer poems, and very possibly because she needed to do more housework. And then this is also just on my mind because it's the day before the national holiday of Juneteenth, and the museum just came off of a really wonderful program on site this weekend. It was a Juneteenth event put on by a local cultural partner, Ancestral Bridges, and it celebrated and commemorated the history of Black residents of Amherst. And it just reminded me that the museum cannot tell the full story of Dickinson's experience in her context and in her community all on our own. Or at the very least, we are considering her life in Amherst in the 1800s far more richly and truthfully through this community collaboration. So all that to say, I'd love to know, for you as writers, who are the people, or really who is a person who enables you, or who has enabled you to do your work?
That's a lovely question.
It's a beautiful question.
Yeah, I know. I think about, well, I think about my parents because of their sort of just artistic support. Just, it was a normal thing in my household. So just, I have to balance a full-time job and being a mother and being a writer and all of those things. And, you know, my husband is a big part of me being able to do certain things away from home for writing. And I'm very grateful for that. We support each other that way. But I think my family foundation, my grandmother was a writer, and she was, serious, published a novel, was constantly publishing, and that created a sense of normalcy for those endeavors, I would say, which is actually fairly important, I would say. So it's worth acknowledging. My parents just knew that this was a way that I expressed myself and put value in that just from an emotional place. Always celebrated it from the time I was, reading poems from behind the couch because I didn't want anyone to look at me while I did it, and clapping and being my audience and, whatever, to never telling me like, that's a terrible thing to study, those kinds of things. Gave me an emotional core around writing as a practice that I think is one of those sort of invisible things I'm grateful for. It's a really good, hard question.
Yeah,
It's
thank you
a
for these
wonderful-
beautiful questions.
Sure.
Wonderful question.
I think, on my part, I didn't have quite the same relationship with family and art as a child, but now it is, I don't know, that there's been a lot of creating the community around you I try to be conscious of as an adult, whether it's through Peach Mag, the literary journal I ran for 7 years, or Beauty School, the sort of casual virtual learning space I like to work on sometimes, and all of the either students or contributors or editors, like people who make it possible, give me that sense of community and sort of react to what I'm doing that makes me want to keep doing that kind of thing, because I like doing things with other people, even if it is so private most of the time. But then maybe a more direct answer to your question would be my husband Aiden, who's watching for sure, who is down to bring me a seltzer or make dinner when I'm really in it, which when I write, I don't do half an hour a day. I have to be in it for the full day, and he makes that possible for me a lot. And then also, I guess myself, I say no to a lot of things, and I try to live a more low profile life in terms of social engagement, and that's a huge sacrifice because I feel very lonely, but it also makes the poems possible, and the time, you have to find it somewhere. So.
I wanted to say me too, that was me, I have done this, but no, I love the, I think it does take a kind of swimming upstream kind of position in life to keep making this a priority and a central part of one's life.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Dickinson said, "Don't you know that no is the wildest word we can assign to language?" This is such a beautiful question. And I have to say, tell you a story. When our son was 6 years old, for Mother's Day, my husband's gift to me was to drive me to this restaurant in Washington, D.C. and say, I'm dropping you off for an hour. Write a poem, and I'll take care. And there have just been various times in my life, juggling children, and nursing and traveling and teaching and so on. And I would put the poem in the back corner. And he's always saying to me, don't put it in the back corner. And I wrote this manuscript when our first year in Helsinki, and to surprise me, he had it published as a chapbook and presented it to me just to tell me the value that he had of my writing poetry, even though I thought it was so peripheral. That was sort of my secret gift to myself in my time, but I never felt that I could put it first. And I felt that the poems were like children, they would be nudging at your sleeve.
Yeah.
And, when you're not having time for them, and you're putting them off thinking you're always going to be able to come back for them. And, needing you. And you realize that isn't the case. You have to write them when you can, and it's so hard to do that. And so I think every poem that I have lost 30 poems that I had the words, I had the lines, and I did not have time to write it down. And Krister is always saying, you write it down, and trying to organize time in my life where I could just have a dedicated time to do it, really encouraging me. So I would say that is so huge, because we have so many things asking us to do everything but be the poet.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why it's been 51 years for you too.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yep. And
Thank you. Bridget, you said something in our first conversation all together. You said, as a metaphysical poet, Dickinson is my North Star. I just wanted to, kind of on this note of the people who help make the poetry happen and who are a part of the poetry as well, I thought I'd read a letter that Dickinson wrote to Susan Dickinson. She said, "Excuse Emily and her atoms. The North Star is of small fabric, but it denotes much."
yeah.
So, on that note, I'm going to have to conclude us for today. But everyone at home, thank you so much for joining. And thank you to Bridget Lowe, Rachelle Toarmino, and Barbara Mossberg. And we hope you will go online to learn more about these poets and read their work. While you're there, you can head to the Emily Dickinson Museum's website to see the rest of the series lineup. Next month, we will feature Leslie Wheeler and Nadia Alexis. And we'll be streaming these events live monthly through September, and we hope that you will join us again. And if you'd like to make a donation to the museum in support of free programs like this one, you can do so at www.emilydickinsonmuseum.org. And the link will go in the chat for you for that. And we do rely on your gifts and thrive on your participation, so thank you. And it has been a delight to share this evening with you and with you.
Thank you
Good night.
so much.